And the point being that I think we talked about other centers, we have to begin to think about labs, okay? And I don't know if there are provisions in for laboratory licenses. I don't know where, and that's all going to be coming as far as transfers to laboratories, because we're going to be moving in the direction where everything will be tested, everything will be labeled, and they're going to be included in the process of transportation in and out and everything like that.
I guess my question is with transport of the plants of, that are going to be transferred from the work in progress into a center to be logged, or from one center to another. If a center was to transfer a bunch of their plants from work in progress into their center, into their inventory, and at some point in the transport process there was a weather or a transport delay, winter weather could easily kill a plant in transport. How is that being handled and addressed by this? And if those plants all die in transport and when they get to the center, they're not going to be able to be revived, has that been addressed to turn those into waste or whatever that is?
Those have been discussed and will be addressed. Where we really did the umbrella view of it is how we started this, that idea, that outline of cultivation manufacturing. Those things are going to come to be when those forms exist, and we've spoken to Dan about the idea of wet versus dry, loss, being able to account for loss throughout those data collection points. And so when you leave the center with weight or plants, you will log that in whatever function that's going to look like, which we don't have our grasp on just yet. At least our committee doesn't. I know you guys are working on it diligently. So the intent is to have a field in however that data is acquired and have an unavailability for loss. So as we get to see it and really have some feedback on it, we'll be able to better address where that'll come in.
I think Bobby would have.
Thank you. Matt, is the state going to issue or prepare a uniform transport form that everybody can carry? Is that implicit in all of this?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Brian?
That's great. In terms of the waterway loss, it is going to be an issue where there's going to be a lot of data collection, but for the sake of transport specifically, I think almost everyone will be using an airtight container, if for nothing else, odor reasons, in which case you should not have any appreciable water loss in a single transport like that. It'll be after you're getting a lot of air exposure in the MMC over time that will likely be more of an issue.
I also think that as far as law enforcement is concerned in the transportation, our goal is to put the product in some sort of tamper-proof container, so that when it's sealed at the OPC, it's sealed, tamper-proof, some sort of tamper-proof is used, and then when it gets to the MMC, that tamper-proof is then under camera will be removed. So if there's any degradation of that tamper-proof seal, we'll know about it when it gets to the MMC.
Move Dan Wade.
Yeah, move Dan Wade, thank you.
And I appreciate, and I know that everyone in the room here is going to run a great operation. But you have to understand where we're coming from in law enforcement. Think about the worst possible dispensary, I should say medical marijuana dispensary owner, who's going to drive over with a Ziploc bag. And then how is law enforcement going to handle that situation? And obviously maybe taking the longer way around. If you can, when you're thinking about it, don't think about the best case scenario, think about the worst case scenario, and then the fraud that we have unfortunately seen so much of. And that's where we're trying to come from. What tools can law enforcement have on any given stop where they're going to be able to diagnose, no matter if it's in a Ziploc container or something really fancy, is this legitimate or not?
And the worst case scenario in my mind is the person that isn't even a center owner is trucking product through the state under the auspices of being a licensee and the potential fraud associated
We
with
will
that.
certainly hear from attorneys down the road when there's 100 pounds that's in a gas tank that this is somehow associated with a medical marijuana center. So that's what we are looking for. Let's just take those off the table. What tools can we have on the streets to take those off the
So
table?
let me ask you this, can you come up with a suggestion that we could take a look at? Because obviously, none of us at our table have had this issue ever before, and we don't know what other protocols are. if you could make a recommendation that we could look at, that we could say, okay,
Cost effective.
yeah, that's cost effective, that we could then look at it and say, okay, this makes sense, and let's tweak this, but give us a starting point. That would be wonderful.
Well, you know, I mean, I honestly, I'll look, I'll certainly confer with folks, but just like you all, this is brand spanking new.
No,
I don't think there's
but we
anything
want to do what's right
But
for you by you.
what I'd like to do is perhaps be a part of a meeting, or if you could maybe email me what you got, and then I can kind of shed my light on it a little bit, whatever little there might be there. But I can give you some thoughts, and we can kind of work together.
Wonderful, thank you.
And
We
we
welcome you.
we have been discussing taking the way that other pharmaceuticals, restricted pharmaceuticals are transported and trying to put systems similar into effect. So if you want to at least get a feel for if that does not seem comprehensive enough to you, that'll help us know how to move forward.
I want to thank you for the compliment that we are all upstanding citizens and business owners. As an upstanding business owner, I'll tell you that my concern is quite the same, that when I get to a place where I have an employee doing that transporting, I want to make sure that container is sealed and I don't have to be responsible. So that your concern is shared by us as well, absolutely.
Dan's got a point. If it was McDonald's, we'd all be in trouble.
I never make it home.
Can we put that in the rolling notes?
We have to be hiding.
Maybe maybe there's a way to integrate a tamper-proof label that is generated with the bill of lading, or however the state's going to do it, that would, as long as the package hasn't opened, that could address slight differences in weight. That as long as that tamper-proof seal or that tamper-proof label that could be issued specific to the bill of lading that they'll be able to generate from the site to account for that, so you don't have to worry about those slight differences in weights or scales. Secondly, one of the questions that, one of the issues that the patient advocacy group had come up with was about, whether law enforcement should be able to seize a person's medicine. I mean, is this the place to address how law enforcement should conduct themselves when faced with a bill of lading and a car with 20 pounds of marijuana?
I think we'll get there at some point, but I also think that it's already in statute, but we'll talk about that. Any other comments on that?
I wanted to go back to Mr. Durkin's point. You have a very good point. I mean, what we're trying to do here is create a closed loop production and distribution system, right? Where within, and you need a pass in order to play, so to speak, right? So if you're within this closed loop distribution system, you can obviously avail yourself of the protections, but the other side of that coin is that you must assume the duties and responsibilities that the code gives you, right? So ignorance of the law is no defense. If it's a licensee that hasn't taken the time to either hire an attorney or read the rules of how they should behave and distribute, those people need to be subject to either administrative sanctions, and if the facts of the particular matter merit it, to criminal sanction under the criminal marijuana statutes. So to make these rules in the worst case scenario eventuality, like Dan is kind of drilling into my head, if people are going to, bend the rules or fudge the rules, they're going to do it. It's our job to catch those people. But kind of conceptually going in for us, it's the recognition, the acknowledgement that it's a closed loop system, that there are protections and responsibilities, and that those individuals that don't bother to, that rather enjoy the benefits and don't bother with the burdens, there's going to be a reckoning.
Well, on this camera issue, Mr. Cook, I think there is a problem if patients are ever filmed on this camera.